10 before the end, let's get into it. This is so heavy. Whew. You'll notice a lot of these books are fantasy books, but the first book I have is Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is a Norse-inspired mythology fantasy book. I actually read this book, or I tried to read it a couple years ago, but I read the audiobook format and I've just accepted that I cannot read fantasy books in an audiobook. That is a supplement to my reading. That is not the main reading source because it's just too difficult for me to keep up with what's going on and the spelling and what's going and where they are and everything like that. This is also my first John Gwynne book. On the Moon Hatch by Sarah A. Parker. This book has been all over my FYP. I know it's like a dragon fantasy romantasy book. It's like a fantasy romance or like romantic fantasy, not like necessarily a romantasy. I ended up getting the physical copy even though it is on Kindle Unlimited because it does have a 20-page glossary. And ain't nobody got time to be flipping back and forth on a Kindle to look at the glossary. I feel like there's just like a lot of first book in fantasy series because I've catched up on a lot of fantasy series that I was working through kind of, I don't know. Debatable. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Honestly, I got this book because it reminded me so much of Discovery of Witches, but make it cozy. So I wanted to see if like it would live up to the hype. Honestly, this book is so popular. It's been on like so many awards lists and like best of the year lists that I needed to get to it finally. And I feel like it's a good like maybe like late like early winter book, late fall book. So we'll see. Or is it a spring book? This is probably one of the ones that I can assure you that I'm going to get through. It is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I have never read this before. There's actually someone here on TikTok that is doing a read-along book lore. That's like their name. And I'm just following along the schedule. It starts November 1st in case you want to join us. But this is something I've always wanted to get through. And I feel like I needed the push of having it to be like a buddy read. Because there's just also so much lore and stuff to discuss with this book. Like I think it would be too much for me to read it by myself. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This book is honestly so popular on this app and I need to finally get to it. It's not just on this app, it's like popular all over the internet, in real life. Like this book series, people love it, and I also felt like it was a good kind of introduction into sci-fi fantasy, again because it is a short book comparatively to a lot of these other books. I've heard that the series just gets better and better with each book, so I really wanted to finally see what all the hype is about. Cassandra Clare's Clockwork Prince. This is the second book in the series. Ideally, I would get through the last two books in the series, one in November, one in December. I'm trying to just make it last. I've never actually read this series before, and I finally reread the first one last month, and I absolutely adored it, but I didn't have my copy with me, so I had to like wait until I could get my copy of The Clockwork Prince, and it's very chaotic because I have like every single book that I'm reading in the series, like it's a different edition. Like, this is the most newest edition. I have like the second edition, then I have the first edition, like a little bonkers if you ask me, but I'm really excited because honestly so many people have told me that this is their favorite series in the Shadowhunters universe, so I need to see. And I loved book one. Like I thought it was excellent. Like if The Clockwork Angel was released in 2024, it would be like one of these books that like blows up the internet. It would be like the next Fourth Wing, and I stand on that. Next is a really fun book, and I want to get to it before the end of October. This is The Monstrous Duke and I. It is a monster historical fiction, and I think that that just fits like all of my little favorite subculture niche things in romance that I gotta get to it. It was also a gift from a friend of mine, Zainab. If you are on this app, you should follow her. She is an amazing writer and she writes historical romance. Next is a book I don't know much about. I just know that it has a really cult following. It is The Grand Master of Demonic Cultivation by Mo Dao Zushi. This is, from what I know, it was like adopted into a anime. It's a light novel. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know the exact terminology when it comes to Chinese like webcomics or web dramas or whatever this is. Just please let me know. I ended up buying it because the Barnes & Noble lady that was helping me was like so adamant about loving this book and loving the romance of it and like just loving the storyline and the plot and everything. I was like, you know what? Like it has a cult following for a reason. I'm gonna try to get into it. I felt like this would also be like a really nice winter book to cuddle up with. The Will of Many by James Islington. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is like a Roman mythology or Roman inspired fantasy. I have just seen so many people talk about how much they like this book. It is book one in a series, so I imagine there will be a book two eventually. This book has taken over just like my FYP, my entire recommended list all year, and I would love to get to it before the end of the year so I can be part of the hype. What the drama is, what's the sitch. Finally, Unravel Me. I have been on my Shatter Me journey for a while. I read the first book earlier this year and I had never read it. I thought it was gonna be kind of cringe. it was, but also I loved it. I was like, I need to continue, and everyone says that Unravel Me absolutely destroys them. So I'm really looking forward to it. I read the first book and the novella that's in between the first and the second book a couple months ago, and I finally got the physical book after trying to read this on ebook, but you know, honestly, it just looks nice on my bookshelf altogether. So while I was at it, that is my 10 before the end. Let me know if there are any books here that you have read, if you recommend them, what I should be getting up to. This obviously doesn't include like my Kindle books. I don't know if I'll get to all of these because I'm like a very notorious mood reader, but I feel like having the physical books and putting this out there on the internet is really gonna help me. So